This is Closereads,
a philosophy podcast with Mark and Wes.
I'm Wes Alwan.
And I'm Mark Linsenmeyer. We are going to talk about Hume's Treatise of Human Nature from 1739, Book 2, The Passions. Why did you, we had gotten a request to do Hume as a second example after Hobbes of some hard-nosed empiricism. And so like Hobbes, Hume has an idea that all we perceive are just impressions. There's just sensations. There's things. And in fact, Hume divides them into impressions and ideas, as we will soon see, where, do you remember the difference between the two?
I think idea, I'm just guessing here, I don't. I think ideas may be more like complex ideas for Locke, and impressions are more like simple ideas of sensory impressions. And complex ideas are more like what we would think of as general ideas rather than particular qualia sensory impressions.
Now, actually, what I remembered is accurate. So I have part one open here.
You just made me make a fool of myself, Mark.
No, I was opening it while you were saying that. So, but I mean, I think that's reasonable that when we're talking about things that we want to manipulate, we're not going to be manipulating impressions. We're going to be manipulating ideas. But the way that Hume actually divides them is not that they're fundamentally different kinds of things. These differ. All perceptions of the human mind fall into two distinct kinds, which I shall call impressions and ideas. This is the first line of volume 1, book 1. These differ in the degrees of force and liveliness with which they strike upon the mind and make their way into thought or consciousness. So if they have more force, we'll call them impressions, including sensations, passions, emotions. By ideas, I mean the faint images of the others in thinking and reasoning. So
but he basically means like schema. So he is thinking of general ideas. I'm pretty sure, even though, I forgot about the whole weaker, stronger.
It includes, general ideas, because how would we, and of course he has a bunch of comments in the first part about how we would create general ideas out of individual ideas, but it is fundamentally the same thing we saw in Hobbes, where it's almost like, I don't want to say it's binary. It's not on or off, but it is black and white. What would be the scientific term? In other words, there's only one dimension and the dimension initially is just how vivid, how forceful it is. It's either there, full stop, ooh, what an impression, or it's fading out, it's almost gone. You can see how memory is an obvious paradigm case for that. All right. So just I think the important thing in there is passions, though, apparently, at least the individual occurrence of a passion, you are feeling fear right now, is an impression, not an idea. All right.
Makes
so
sense.
you want to get going on part
Sure.
1, ideas, their origin, composition, connection, abstraction, etc. Section 1, the origin of our ideas.
Wait, I thought we were
That
doing
is
the
wrong.
passions.
That's wrong. I read the wrong thing.
Okay.
Sorry.
Right.
Part 2, part 2, part 1, pride and humility. Section 1, division of the subject. Go.
Having divided all the perceptions of the mind into impressions and ideas, we can now divide impressions into 1 original and 2 secondary. The distinction between these is the one I drew in 1.I.2, using the language of 1, impressions of sensation, and 2, impressions of reflection. 1. Original impressions, that is, impressions of sensation, arise in the soul, not from any preceding perception, but from the constitution of the body, from the animal spirits, or from the effect of objects on external organs. These include all the impressions of the senses and all bodily pains and pleasures. 2. Secondary impressions, that is, impressions of reflection, arise out of the original ones, either immediately or through the mediation of ideas of the original ones. These include the passions and other emotions resembling passions. Example of the mediation. Oh, sorry, that's the editor, right?
I mean, we might as well read what the editor has to say.
I wonder how much of the 1s and 2s are coming from the editor, but
right.
Example of the mediation of ideas, Joe's 2 secondary impression, present anger against Max, is caused by Joe's present memory of being hurt by Max, which is caused by 1 being hurt by Max, which was an original impression 1. Yes, I don't know if the numbers help. Actually, it's a typical analytic. It's like I can't remember what the number goes to. Come on.
So we're going to hope that this was a recap. And even though he's referred to a section previously in the book, we're not going to read that whole section right now. That it at least sounds, though there are lots of questions to be answered, it at least sounds fairly clear to me. Is it sound clear to you what the difference between these, ow, I got hurt right now. I just wonder. So it seems like he's making a point. If I want to say, you said something that offended me, how is that different? This, ow, I've been offended, from, ow, I hurt my finger, or ow, I'm feeling fear. Those are both primary impressions, but the idea, there's something else that you have offended me. So it's an impression plus the idea of its particular cause, its particular rationale, something like that. Therefore, it has to be an impression of reflection, he's saying, a secondary impression.
When Charlie bites my finger, to bring up that old, how old is that now? That's video must be 100 years old.
I will also not look that up right now.
I think those kids are middle-aged at this point. But yeah, when Charlie bites my finger, there's that immediate pain and that qualia, I would say, associated with it. And I think if we're thinking about these other, I don't know, I guess emotions and so passions, as he puts it, there's something different about that. So if I get offended by Charlie biting my finger, or I'm angry at him for that, that, well, in that particular case, something is involved with being aware of the other subject, right? We just did Tomasello with chimps. Mm-hmm. They're not getting offended by anything, and they don't have any moral emotions, according to Tomasello. But I imagine that doesn't apply in every case, an awareness of the consciousness of another. But in any case, he's making the argument that it's a second order phenomenon. It's not a first order phenomenon. I have to have some raw data, some raw material for that to act upon in order to have that emotion, right? So I need to have the immediate experience of seeing a lion and having that impress itself upon me with these impressions or primary ideas before I can go second level and say, okay, what are these impressions doing to me? And then say, oh, I'm afraid. This is the kind of distinctions that the Stoics themselves make, because they say, well, we don't have any control over these primary impressions, but we do have control over how we respond to it, right? The emotional reaction to it. So that gives us a good paradigm from
and just
distinction he's making.
To call out the final sentence that you read there, these include the passions and other emotions resembling passions. So we'll have to see what the difference between a full-blown emotion and a passion or something resembling it, I can guess, which is passive. That passions are passive. An emotion maybe is something that you work yourself into, but we'll have to see. We keep going here. The mind in its perception has to begin somewhere. It can't begin with ideas, because every idea comes after a corresponding impression. So it must start with impressions. There must be some impressions that turn up in the soul without having been heralded by any preceding perception. The causes of these impressions of sensation are natural objects and events out there in the world. I couldn't examine those without straying from my present subject into anatomy and natural science. So I'm going to confine myself to the other two impressions, the ones I call secondary and of reflection, which arise either from original impressions or from ideas of them. Okay, bodily pains and pleasures are the source of many passions, both immediately, when they are felt by the mind, and through the mediation of ideas when they are considered by it. But they themselves arise originally in the soul or in the body, call it what you will, without any preceding thought or perception. An attack of gout, which is extremely painful, leads to a long series of passions, grief, hope, fear, and so on, but it doesn't come immediately from any mental state or idea.
Okay, who needs Charlie bit my finger when Hume's going to give his own very clear examples? That's very clear.
And I think we should not read.
No,
There's too many
let's not.
things that
No,
the
no.
editor has put in here for us to bother adding, unless we're actually confused.
Yeah.
Well, let's make sure we understand what is the point being made here, that bodily pains and pleasures are the source of many passions, both immediately felt by the mind and through the mediation of ideas when they're considered by it. I mean, I guess I see that, certainly not in the same way that when I think about the past pain that I have, are we really just saying that is only different insofar as it is fainter?
Well, we can have present pain as well, right? So we have these first order, I want to call them emotions, but I guess that's a term of art here, but call it that for now. But, there's an attack of gout. There's the pain of that. We feel in the body, so to speak. And then there's maybe grief about that. Hope it will go away. Being really pissed off that I am having yet another attack of gout. And so I can have all those emotions at the same time. And there's something different about the first order feeling or pain of having gout and the second order pain of being angry about it or grieving about it or fearing that it's going to continue on. Those second order passions are directed towards the pain. They make use of that first order pain as a kind of matter or play for higher level emotions, passions.
And I guess we have to keep in mind that this is after Hume has already discussed in volume 1, in book 1 here, his account of causality. So when we don't have to get to when he's saying, well, the initial immediate pain leads to a long series of passions, causes a long series of passions, but it doesn't come immediately from any mental state or idea. I mean, that has to mean, right? It doesn't come after. I mean, he wants to say that there's not a causal relationship between the secondary ones. There's not, I think you brought up the Stoics. I think for the Stoics, it might be circular, right? Or is it such that, ow, I have gout. As I meditate on this, as you say, it leads to all these other passions. Can those meditations feed back and actually make the primary impression different?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I think the way the Stoics, from what I recall, there are certain aspects of impressions that we don't have control over. So if I get my leg broken in a car accident, I'm gonna feel pain, and that's involuntary. The Stoics recognize that not everything you feel is voluntary or you have control over. Now, I think you're right, and they would probably acknowledge, but that meditative practice, become a Zen Buddhist, I can wander out in front of a car and nothing hurts me. Yes, with lots of effort, but yeah. Am I getting at your question?
Sure. I'm right. Can you essentially anesthetize yourself? You certainly can't do it immediately, although you can do it preparatorily. That if you're about to get a shot and you get all worked up about it, maybe it feels to you more painful than it otherwise would. Or that's why they maybe try to sometimes surprise you. 1, 2, ow,
Yeah.
And so it's just a little pinch so you don't work it up. I think that dividing line between the immediate passion and what it leads to is, I don't know if we can draw a sharp line there. Except unless you're the Stoic, and the line is for the Stoic, which ones can you change and which ones can't you? That would be the line.
Yeah. I mean, we're capable of, at the level of reflection or psychological defense or practice, we can probably change our involuntary physical responses to the world. So for instance, I think part of what a meditator would accomplish in terms of dealing with pain is accomplished through their ability to regulate biofeedback, their ability to regulate their own bodies using their minds. But, and of course, if, your point is well taken. If when I burn my finger on the stove, I have to ignore it, because if I put it in water or I start worrying about it and trying to treat it, it's so much worse. I just forget about it. That's an example. So yeah, you can make things a lot worse by thinking about them. And you can even make these first order passions more intense or less intense by way of the second order comportment to them. I think that's true.
I mean, we're getting at, and I assume maybe he's dealt with this in volume 1. How does duration affect any of this? That he wants to treat impressions as if they were atomic, which would be momentary, I guess, but certainly like the memory, if I dwell on a memory, I could meditatively dwell on the same memory for quite a long time, or dwell on this pain, or in fact, a persistent pain like gout, presumably not like a shot, is not going to be, there's some things to say about the phenomenology that I'm not sure that Hume is allowed to say, that it's constant, but it seems like it's pulsing, these constant pains, maybe in part because of, how your attention shifts and just our capacity to feel pain continuous, right? It seems like kind of lessens, even though it's objectively not any worse. But then you notice it again, and then so there's a lot.
Yeah, I think that, gout is a purposeful example because it has this duration. Mm-hmm. It's a simpler example in a way because he can give you enough, there's enough time there to have those second order passions about the gout.
I keep going.
Yep. The reflective impressions can be divided into calm and violent. Of the first kind is the sense of beauty and ugliness in actions, works of art, and external objects. Okay, let me just pause there. I'm not sure I understand that. Reflective impressions. Okay, these are what I've been calling second order. Calm and violent. Okay, so he's putting the aesthetic into the calm. This is an interesting turn.
Even if it's really ugly or really beautiful, it's still calm. Well, let's see why he says that.
I was ready to hear about fear and envy and pride, and now we're talking about the aesthetic. Okay, so let's keep going. Of the second kind are the passions of love and hatred, grief and joy, pride and humility. These are passions properly so called. The division is far from exact. Poetry and music frequently produce intense raptures that are far from calm, while those other impressions, the passions properly so called, can subside into an emotion that is so soft as to be almost imperceptible. Let me just pause to say what a great writer Hume is. But the passions are usually more violent than the emotions arising from beauty and ugliness. And that's the basis on which we draw the line. The human mind is such a big and complicated topic that I need help in ordering my treatment of it. And it's in that spirit that I shall take advantage of this common and plausible classification and set myself to explain those violent emotions or passions, their nature, origin, causes, and effects. Okay. It occurs to me well, of course, as a moral sentimentalist, I mean, we did his theory of taste, and I actually, even in the Partially Examined Life, and even beyond what we did there, I spent a lot more time with that essay thinking about it and writing about it. So why am I surprised that he's describing our aesthetic response to the world as a kind of passion when, you know, the other part of the tradition, which is more of the German tradition from which the concept of aesthetics as opposed to taste for Hume comes, seems to, right, emphasize the disinterest in the aesthetic and the fact that it is not, right, appetitive. It is not merely an emotional response to the world. Kant's play of the faculties and all of that, the revving of the engine, and so.
See, I thought you were going to focus on the fact that it's a passion as opposed to a judgment, because I remember.
Oh yeah, it's part of it.
About, yeah, Hume, that it's a type of perception, that it's like having the discernment to detect the taste of the metal key that you've put in the jug of wine, and how it very slightly alters that. And that is, now I'm trying to remember, was that an example for Hume of?
What he's trying to get at with that example is the idea that some people can have better taste than others, and it's a matter of resolution in part in the sensory apparatus. So some people just have higher, they're able to distinguish more, in part because they have more practice, but it could be just, you know, they're more sensitive as people, right? But and that gives us a basis, the idea that simply that some people are more sensitive and can discern more or less. That's why we would use a word like refinement, right?
Sure.
That could be a basis for some people having more reliable opinions about beauty than others. So in a way, when Hume thinks about a standard, you know, I think the title of the essay is Of the Standard of Taste. When Hume is thinking about, well, what is the standard? Ultimately, the standard is the critic, the better critic, as opposed to the worst critic. This is like sage, you know, sage philosophy that Hume is appealing to there. But
there's still a question for me of whether in a judgment of taste for Hume, are you detecting or you're feeling pleasure, right? That is ultimately what defines beauty versus ugliness, is having, or the editor says, in this version, ugliness, a word Hume doesn't use, always replaces his deformity, which did now but doesn't mean the same thing. He does regularly use the adjective ugly and often associates it with deformity. So
how much of this translation is, I mean, how much of this is a translation? Like,
yeah, so should we be using this version? We have used these earlymoderntext.com versions before, and even though they have weird formatting, they're readily available, and I know they won't disappear.
So this is, when I say he's a good writer, maybe I'm just reacting to
no, I think this is not a translation. This was written in English, and anytime any words are changed, there's going to be a note like that. And it doesn't seem like there are many of these notes. In fact, I see in the previous sentence, remember that for Hume, perception covers every mental state. So it's just a purely what really should be in a footnote in another version here, just to help us out.
Okay.
All right. The reason I brought that up, though, deformity seems to be something you would detect. Beauty would be something you detect. Detecting a particular flavor seems a little different than detecting the beautiful or a deformity. I mean, they're related, but of course, detecting a particular flavor has more of content than merely yay or nay, right? If that's what fundamentally beauty is, having a pleasure, knowing that you're having that pleasure, and it's a particular kind of pleasure. It's, you know, a pleasure attributed to the object itself. I might just be confusing my different aestheticians here. but I thought it was something for Hume.
I mean, Schiller is willing
complicated
to
like that.
attribute it to the object, but traditionally,
Mhm.
it seems like he was an outlier there, from what I remember, and that most, within the tradition, most people talking about aesthetics want to talk about the response, right? Kant himself calls it subjective because it's really a matter of what the human faculties are doing and the
Mhm.
way they're designed. It gets confusing because isn't that his point about cognitive stuff as well? I was always confused about that, but in any case, that's the standard gloss on this, is that attributing it to the object itself is unusual, and that's something that, that's what Schiller did.
Right. So for Hume, it is something that's in you, but you could still have arguments about it, right? There's still a standard of taste. The person's sensation, emotion that is more acute, as we were just saying, is the one that we should listen to. The expert, the one who's able to feel out, because you wouldn't necessarily even have the appropriate emotions if you don't detect the thing that would cause it, right? If aesthetic beauty is brought in part by symmetry, that means you have to actually detect the lines and the fact that they are symmetrical or whatever is going on.
Yeah, there's more to it, of course. That's one of, I think, 4 or 5 points that he goes over.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
all right, this is not
just in
about
case listeners are going to complain to us. We're trying to dredge up our knowledge of Hume's aesthetics, and I don't even. I think he's not going to even be covering that here, really, is he? I think
right.
we're doing Pride and Humility, and
this is only brought up to say this is what we're not talking about. Keeping going, we're almost done with the intro here. Looking over the passions, we find that they divide into direct and indirect. By direct passions, I mean ones that arise immediately from good or evil, from pain or pleasure. By indirect passions, I mean ones that have the same sources as the others, but only when those sources are combined with other qualities. At this stage, I can't justify or explain this distinction any further. I can only say that under the indirect passions, I include pride, humility, ambition, vanity, love, hatred, envy, pity, malice, generosity, along with the passions that depend on those. Under the direct passions, I include desire, aversion, grief, joy, hope, fear, despair, and security. I shall begin with the indirect passions. So let's just make sure we're
all right.
Without,
Yeah.
obviously, he's going to give us examples in a second here, but why is he considering?
Direct.
So you see something, you desire it. You have it. It gives you joy. It gives you grief. It gives you hope. It gives you fear. Even those, it seems that there is some propositional thing going on, right? For it to give you hope, like that does not seem so immediate and direct. That seems like it involves a cognitive component as opposed to merely feeling desire. I don't know. I guess even
That's
desire.
true. No, I think hope is hope is an odd one to put there, just on first glance. I mean, he's going to obviously have an argument and an explanation for all of these, but you're right to immediately single that one out.
Well, I don't even know what security means exactly. Maybe these are just all a matter of there's a thing in front of you, and either you want it then or you hope you can get it. Like in other words, hope is a modulation of desire, that there's desire for things that you want in the present, for the future, desire to have had it in the past. I'm not sure that that's a thing, but maybe that's part of joy, is you're thinking about,
I think security is just the opposite of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And we can think of these as let's just think about so he says direct passions, they arise immediately from the good or evil or the pain and pleasure we're experiencing. Indirect, they have those sources, but those sources have to be combined with other qualities. Yeah. So it's almost like a simple idea, complex ideas distinction at the level of the passions. And I get that. So in your parse, it sounds like you were parsing that out as a difference between things that have propositional content and that don't. And that certainly might be part of it. How can hope be an immediate response? I don't know. Fear, I get. Security, which I just think is the opposite of anxiety, I get. Despair, yep. But so I guess we'll find out. Yeah.
Let me focus on one other thing before we go on. They arise, direct passions, I mean those that arise immediately from good or evil, comma, from pain or pleasure. So are those two being glossed here due to something he probably said in book one of this?
Well, he famously defines what's good. There's a famous equation by Hume. I forget how he puts it, of the good with what's pleasurable or something like that. So we gain awareness of moral good and evil by experiencing pleasure and of the pleasure of approval. So it's almost like a pragmatist's approach, where we have to, again, this is the sentimentalism of Hume. We have to have an emotional response to something to have a moral response to it, or a feeling of pain or pleasure has to ground the moral response. So our evaluations of things as good are intimately connected to feelings of pleasure and pain.
Sure, I understand. Even back to Epicurus, and Aristotle was arguing about this. So contemporaries of Aristotle were arguing about whether good is equal to pleasure, whether evil is equal to pain. By the time of Hume, I think that we have an idea that what could good and evil be built off of, if not for pain and pleasure, right? And so then the utilitarians obviously take that and run with it. But to say they're built off of doesn't mean there's a simple equivalence. And I don't know if he's making in this sentence a simple equivalence.
Yeah,
evil, pain or pleasure.
I don't remember it well enough to know, other than what I just said about the exact relationship. But
all right, section 2. Pride and humility. Their objects.
Their objects and causes. The passions of pride and humility are simple and uniform impressions, so we can't, however many words we use, properly define them, or any of the passions for that matter. This resembles the fact that we can't verbally define red because the idea or impression of redness is simple and uniform. The most we can claim to offer is a description of them, a description in which we list the states of affairs that accompany them. But pride and humility are commonly used words, and the impressions they stand for are the most common of all. So no one needs my help to form an accurate idea of them with no risk of getting them wrong. I shan't waste time on preliminaries, therefore, and will start right away on my examination of these passions. See, there's a word I expect to see a lot more of, shan't, and other words like it. That would make me feel like I'm reading Hume.
Right. This is definitely modernized visually, spelling wise, which I appreciate. I don't need to read.
I know.
The double S's or whatever.
Right. The S's that look like F's, and
it's
so, do they have a lisp or anyway?
Yeah, it's so interesting that pride and humility are the starting ones, because to me those seem pretty complicated, right? What does pride involve? Like, well, it's a judgment about the quality of myself. How is a quality, if qualities are all come down to pain and pleasure, well, myself, the thing that has the pains and pleasure, that's got to be good by definition, right? It's like pain, the very existence of me. And I don't know, unless you're a Buddhist and you think your very existence means more pain than pleasure, it seems like pride should be almost a default if you have this equation of good with pleasure.
Well, even worse, it's pride corresponds to the third part of the soul in ancient Greek terms, right?
Mm-hmm.
To thumos, which I always line up with recognition in Hegel and say the superego in Freud. And these are, it's the kind of emotion that's intimately related to self-consciousness and to the awareness of the other's consciousness of you. And so it seems, and maybe we can say that about all of these second order emotions. I kind of floated that idea before. And maybe that will end up being the dividing line, in a way, right? All of these, what is he calling them? All of these indirect passions seem to involve intersubjectivity. I don't know if that's the right word, but are responses to other subjects or to the idea of their responses to us as a subject. So love, which involves the personhood of another, versus desire, which could probably be more basic, right? And objectifying, something like that. But in any case, yeah.
Yeah, it is obvious that pride and humility, though directly contrary to one another, have the same object. The object is oneself, i.e., the sequence of related ideas and impressions of which one has an intimate memory and consciousness. Whenever we are driven by pride or humility, our view is always focused on ourself. We feel one or the other of these opposite affections, are elated by pride or dejected with humility, depending on how favorable an idea of ourself we have. When we are in a state of pride or humility, whatever other items we are thinking about, we're considering them in relation to ourselves. Otherwise, they wouldn't arouse those passions or increase or lessen them in the slightest. When oneself doesn't enter the picture, there's no room for either pride or humility.
Yeah. But it's about what others think of us, though, in particular. Even if it's about what we think of ourselves, it's still about what others think of us. The other is in the picture here, and I think he's leaving that out so far. We can't, so, right, if I feel proud of something I've done, yes, I can feel proud of that without telling mommy or anyone else. But I have to at least have the fantasy of someone else seeing what I've done, in my opinion, or I have to be splitting myself into two and be taking on both the role of the other and the self. So, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
pride
I'm just
is
trying
this
to think
dyadic,
through
complicated thing. Yeah.
what about Castaway? So Tom Hanks is making a hut or whatever, and he accomplishes it and feels a sense of pride. I did it, as opposed to the hut falls down. Now, when you're
that's why I said we don't have to tell mommy or anything. We don't actually have to do that, but we have to have that potentially. We have to have the fantasy of that possibility, or we're telling ourselves, or we become the other in that sense. But there's still an other.
I guess, yeah. So when the hut falls down, do you necessarily, when you say shit, do you necessarily, is that exclamation about of that's probably not an exclamation of humility. That's like the same thing you would do if a lightning storm came and hit the hut and burned it up. You would likewise, you're not necessarily holding yourself responsible unless it was a particular, oh, my poor engineering skills made that thing fall down. I will never be able to build a good hut because I never learned how to freaking learn basic physics and architecture and things.
That's why the profession of therapy exists, because that is what people will do. Yeah, there's a lot of different types of shit or ways to say shit when the hut falls down. Is it the shit of just, oh, I'm going to be in the rain, or is it I'm terrible at everything? And here's another example. But,
all right. Well, we can see if he betrays any of the recognition of fundamentally social aspect that you think he should as we go.
That's the word I was looking for. Social, not intersubjective. All right. But although the connected sequence of perceptions that we call self is always the object of these two passions, it can't possibly be their cause. It can't unaided arouse them. What is this?
Skip a bunch of crap in.
Hume goes on to explain. He's not.
This is this is abridged. All right, read the comment in brackets then here in this case.
Does it say abridged above? Hume goes on to explain that if one's self alone caused either pride or humility, it would always arouse both together. And because they are contrary passions with the same object, namely oneself, they would cancel out. So that in the upshot, neither would be caused. He continues, it is impossible for a man to be both proud and humble at the same time. It often happens that a man has reasons for pride and other reasons for humility. In that case, they take turns in him, or if they do come together and collide, the stronger one annihilates the weaker and loses as much of its strength as has been used up in that process. But in the present case, that is, the supposed case in which the whole cause of someone's pride and or humility is himself, neither of these two passions could ever be stronger than the other, because their common cause, himself, isn't biased in favor of one rather than the other. So it must produce both in the same strength, which means that it can't produce either of them. All right, man. This is distressing.
The fact that this looks obviously abridged now, including how it ended with 4 dots. That line you just read.
That's a bad sign.
Well, we can compare this to another version before we have a part 2.
I'm looking at another version right now, and it does seem I don't think it's been too altered.
I mean, I get the idea that, right, if pride and humility is just an assessment of yourself, well, yourself is always there. What would possibly make you feel pleasure? Or that's why I was saying by default, I feel like we're just, if again, the good is pleasure, then noting that you have pleasure, right? Just being alive and breathing the air, it seems like a pleasurable experience to me. So that by default, if you, insofar as you identified this basic state as coming from you, I'm the one who's breathing. I'm the one who's looking around, I have what a lot of capacities I have to look around and feel things. Then it seems like we should just be in pride of ourselves all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But clearly we're not. So
yeah. No, this is a translation. So in the original, but though that connected succession of perceptions, which we call the self, be always the object of these two passions, it is impossible it can be their cause or be sufficient alone to excite them. It can't unaided arouse them. Is the translation.
So, all right, well, let's keep going here for the moment.
We'll switch to the original Hume, I think, for next time.
Yeah,
not with the bad spellings, but
so we have to distinguish the causes of these passions, that is, the idea that arouses them, from their object, that is, whatever it is that they focus on when aroused. Once pride or humility has kicked in, it immediately turns our attention onto ourself, regarding that as its ultimate aim, its ultimate and final object. But for either pride or humility to be aroused in the first place, another factor is needed, a factor that figures differently in one of these passions from how it figures in the other. Here's how the course of events goes. First, a certain idea, I1, comes before the mind. Number 2, I2 causes or produces an associated passion, P. This is really how Hume talked back here? He's doing this analytic philosophy?
No, this is complete bullshit.
Number 3, P turns the person's attention to I2, the idea of himself. So here we have a passion P that comes between two ideas, I1 and I2. It is caused by I1 and it causes I2. Thus, the first idea, I1, represents the cause of the passion. The second idea, I2, represents the object of the passion. I mean, wouldn't naturally they mostly be the same? I understand you're saying, okay, there was a particular accomplishment that I witnessed, and that is the cause. I built the hut, and so I feel the passion, and the passion is directed toward me. But again, that was ambiguous in at least that example. Do you feel when you say, wow, the act has been completed, the hut is there, it is functional. Are you pleased with the hut, or are you pleased with yourself? Seems like you might be pleased with both. It might kind of go back and forth. It might be ambiguous.
Yeah.
Well, he's going to give more example. Why don't you just keep going? Unless you have a thought.
Okay. Let us start with the causes of pride and humility. The most obvious and remarkable thing about them is the vast variety of things that people can be proud of or humble about. Every valuable quality of mind, of the imagination, judgment, memory, or disposition, wit, good sense, learning, courage, justice, integrity, all these are causes of pride, and their opposites are causes of humility. And people can be proud of or humble about physical characteristics as well as mental ones. A man may be proud of his beauty, strength, agility, handsomeness, elegance in dancing, riding, fencing, skill in any manual business or manufacture, and humble about his lack of any of these. And there's more yet. Pride and humility look further and take in whatever items are in any way connected with us or related to us. Our country, family, children, relations, riches, houses, gardens, horses, dogs, clothes. Very proud of my cat. Any of these can cause either pride or humility.
My dog is a source of great shame to me. That seems pretty obvious. Thinking about these causes, we see that in any cause of pride or humility, we have to distinguish the operative quality from the thing that has the quality. Take the case of a man who's proud of a beautiful house that he owns or that he planned to build. He planned and built. Wow, I predicted the hut is right here. The object of his pride is himself, and its cause is the beautiful house. And the cause is subdivided into the beauty that operates on the pride, the beauty that operates on the pride, and the house that has the beauty. So the operative quality is the beauty that operates on my pride, and the thing that has the quality is the house that has the beauty. All right. Both these parts are essential, and they really are different, both in themselves and how they relate to pride and humility. No one is ever proud of beauty, considered in the abstract, not considered as possessed by something that is related to him. And no one would be proud of a house, even one that he had planned and built and now owned, unless it had beauty or some other pride-inducing quality. So we need to be aware of this distinction between the two parts of any cause of pride or humility, and to handle it with careful exactness. The two can be easily separated from one another, and it takes the two of them in conjunction to produce the passion. Do we really need to be aware of this distinction and handle it with careful exactness? Do you feel that is warranted?
The more exact, the better. But I'm just looking at the original as well, and it's really
you're getting distracted,
annoying
so
me.
You can't even enjoy this present. Well, send me the link to the other.
I can't believe someone would do this, and put in like P's and I2s and stuff. I'm just so offended.
All right. Well, why don't we jump to some other version for section 3? Are the sections in the other version? Okay.
Yeah, it's the same. All right. So things are going to start sounding a little more old timey. Do you want me to give you the Gutenberg?
Sure. Send me the link, and I will make sure that is the one that people have. That people will have both of these to work off of. All right, section 3. Oh gosh. Yeah, this is going to read quite differently.
All right, hold on 1 second. For some reason, I just got pushed out of this. Section 3. Okay, I am here. Is it my turn?
Yeah, I think so.
Being so far advanced as to observe a difference betwixt the object of the passions and their cause, and to distinguish in cause the quality which operates on the passions from the subject in which it inheres, we now proceed to examine what determines each of them to be what it is, and assigns such a particular object and quality and subject to these affections. By this means, we shall fully understand the origin of pride and humility.
So now I want to see what the other one said about this. Having distinguished the object of a passion from its cause, within the cause, having distinguished the operative quality from the thing that has it. So is operative quality in this new version at all?
No, he's translating quality as operative quality.
The quality which operates on the passions from the subject in which it inheres. All right. You didn't actually read the section title, whence these objects and causes are derived. All right.
Which he translates as where these objects and causes come from.
Yep.
Anyway, Hume is obviously still a great writer. It's just, he sounds a little bit more foreign in the original, but.
And it's fine if folks want to continue on their own to read the translated version. It's probably done with care, and we'll put footnotes in for any time that it does anything shifty. But why are we doing this if it's already translated to everyday English? I don't know. Is it just because it's so complicated that even the everyday version needs our commentary? I don't know. It seems that we could do the hard one.
Yeah. So betwixt the object, okay, distinguish the cause which operates on the passions from the subject in which it adheres. Or by subject, he means the object, of course. The unfortunate effect of scholasticism on, I think that our translator has it just as thing.
Yep.
And, assigns to particular objects. Yep. Okay.
All right. So we shall fully understand the origin of pride and humility. It is evident in the first place that these passions are determined to have self for their object, not only by a natural, but also by an original property. What does that mean? All right. No one can doubt, but this property is natural from the constancy and steadiness of its operations. It is always self, which is the object of pride and humility, and whenever the passions look beyond, it is still with a view to ourselves, nor can any person or object otherwise have any influence upon us. That this proceeds from an original quality or primary impulse will likewise appear evident if we consider that it is the distinguishing characteristic of these passions. Unless nature had given some original qualities to the mind, it could never have any secondary ones. Because in that case, it would have no foundation for action, nor could it ever begin to exert itself. Do you want to translate that?
So I'm wondering if these are distinctions that were made earlier, but that had some different terminology in our translation. So the original, okay. So, I mean, okay, so when we talk about original qualities to the mind, so original versus secondary qualities. I mean, obviously, this is like a distinction between what's inherent in our biology and what emerges socially. Because as we pointed out, pride and humility are very social emotions. They have the self for an object, but they also have an original property. Property is natural. I think he's thinking this is like a priori or built in.
Mm-hmm.
It is always self, which is the object.
That this proceeds from an original quality or primary impulse. So in other words, the having of pride, or is it the fact that does the this refer to the fact that pride is always focused on self?
Yeah. I mean, so the broader idea is that pride and humility are focused on the self, but they're caused by a property of some external thing.
Sure.
And our first order reaction to that may be the pain of gout, or, well, is that a great example? The pain of the knife that's just stabbed me. The knife has what the translator called an operative property, I guess, in that relation. I don't know. I think we're going to have to go look before we do this again next time. We're going to have to look at the original on our own time and make sure we have all the right terminology now.
I mean,
for now, I'm a bit confused by what he means by original quality and primary impulse.
I mean, I'm just looking back to it right now. We can reveal it to the listeners here. Original impressions or impressions of sensation are such as without any antecedent perception arise in the mind, from the constitution of the body, from the animal spirits, from the application of objects to the external organs. Secondary or reflective impressions are as proceed from the original ones, either immediately or by the interpolation of its idea. So that all matches what we had in our.
Well, he had reflected. Did he say original or did he say primary in the? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay, so it's original versus secondary, and so the original, it's things like pain or is it fear?
This proceeds from
so we have something like pain. We have an immediate effective response to the world, and on top of that, we can build things like grief or pride. But then, so there's two distinctions. All right, so we need to make sure we're getting this straight, because we really have two distinctions going on here. One is between the reflective and the
immediate, the primary, right?
Or what he's calling the original.
Yeah, those are all the same.
Yeah. So
that's
and
one
the reflective are and the reflective are so what's an example of those two? So they just original impression. So it is the same in the translation. Okay.
Yep.
Impressions of sensation. Secondary of reflection. The original come from an immediate reaction to the outside world, but like bodily pains. Okay, so that's an example of the original. The reflective impressions, we had the aesthetic, right? And then now we have things like all this other stuff, and then there's a subdivision within that. And
yes,
that subdivision is between direct and indirect.
Exactly.
So direct and indirect are two types of reflective impression. and the direct are things like desire, and the indirect are things like pride. Because I just want to make sure we understand we have like a 3 tiers going on now, like bodily pains, then desire or grief or whatever, and then pride and humility. There's 3 levels.
So even desire is not like feeling pain or feeling pleasure, because desire has a cognitive component. That is what makes, I think, even though it's presented as secondary and reflective, are perceived from some of these original ones either immediately by the interpolation of its idea immediately. I guess that's what I'm not really clear about, how it could just, all the examples that are clear are you introduce some cognitive content. So you've got your original impressions, but even saying this thing gives me joy, that is not an original impression like pain or pleasure. That has a cognitive component. You're attributing causality to it. So you're introducing an idea, I assume, right? By saying this thing gives, even just the giving, right? A notion of causality itself makes it a merely derived sensation. Is that correct? Or does even pain, you don't just have pain, but you have a pain that is perceived as caused by your arm that's in pain or something like that, or located in your arm. Maybe that's located in as different than caused.
Well, let's look over the original before next time, that the original of what we just did, and have it straight, and then we can explain that next time.
All right,
before we proceed, because we're at an hour anyway.
We're not going to even try to let me just, now that we've just said that, we're only 2 paragraphs into section 3. So we're considering pride. In the first place, these passions are determined to have self for their object, not only by a natural, but also by an originary property. So it's natural because, and this is new, this is not anything been said early in the text. It's natural because it's always constant. It is always self, which is the object of pride and humility. Whenever the passions look beyond, it's still with a view of ourselves. So I'm not sure what the term natural, but it's certainly, we can be sure of it, that this proceeds from an original quality or primary impulse will likewise appear evident if we consider that is the distinguishing characteristic of these passions. Unless nature had given some original qualities to the mind, it could never have any secondary ones, because in that case it would have no foundation for action, nor could it ever begin to exert itself. Now these qualities, which we must consider as original, are such as are most inseparable from the soul and can be resolved into no other, and such is the quality which determines the object of pride and humility. Okay, can we make sense of just that much? And then we will stop for the day, even though we're in the middle of a paragraph, given what we've said now.
Yeah, I don't understand this third say. The terminology, I don't have a good enough handle of it to give a theory right now of what this means.
I mean, I think original is,
I feel like I've missed something, and that's what's going on with me.
Sure,
so,
sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think original matches primary before, and this is just a general statement about that very first paragraph of this whole text that we've been considering today, that there's primary feelings, and then there is secondary ones that are based on that. Again, he said they either follow immediately or with an admixture of some idea. Okay, I'm not sure what the immediately was, except insofar as, so just think about gout. You've got the immediate pain of the gout that immediately might lead to some other feelings without an admixture of ideas. Such as, I'm trying to think if this is I'm I'm testing out this interpretive hypothesis here. There should be some, I think maybe that the gout is in where is gout? In your limbs?
Foot.
In your foot.
Foot.
Yeah. So is that one that is merely a feeling leading to another feeling? You got the immediate feeling and it leads to another feeling, or does that involve an idea punching in? Like maybe I got this gout from that toilet seat that was dirty back there. That would be definitely something not originary. That involves an insertion of a pretty dubious idea of medical science. All right. So for pride, then there has to be some original thing that we're building off of. So I would think that the original quality here has to be just that flush of pleasure. It then leads to the pleasure is associated with this event or this quality that I have. So it's got its object, it's got its cause, and it's got its object. This is what he's been saying previously. And the quality the cause has to be a primary impulse. I guess that's all that I'm reading here.
I don't know. Sorry.
All right. Well, we'll think about this and we'll turn back to this and see if you think.
Yeah, and it was abridged in the last section. I do feel like I've missed. I don't understand something here. I think it's probably not hard to explain once I go back over we go back over the other stuff, and then we'll do that next time.
All right, folks that are subscribed to us at patreon.com/closereadsphilosophy will get to hear that part too, unless we're feeling especially generous. But maybe we just bury this part 1 and make that only for supporters in this case as well, rather than parade our confusion.
I mean, this is the whole point of the show.
Really?
To be
confused publicly, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're giving people an example of what it means to work through a text, and no one comes to this just knowing it all and being. I mean, this is partly about language and syntax and fine distinctions and trying to get them all straight in one's head. We're not. Before a show, we can sit there with our notes and we can do the bullet points and the P's and Q's if we want. Although I'll never do that, but. If P, then I subscript something. But anyway, yeah, it's harder when you're just going through from the beginning. And I think it's useful to see for people to see us try to figure it out.
Yeah,
Don't be so proud, Mark. Have some humility.
We had gotten a comment I was trying to find here. I thought it was on YouTube, but maybe it was not. Just that somebody saying, hey, it's cool that you guys are doing this, but pretty much I missed the full PEL back and forth, as if what is going on here is merely a result of the absence of Seth and Dylan. When no, we're trying a completely different format here. We could do a PEL episode, and perhaps will, on this very section, but this is not.
Yeah, I think we should. I was going to say that we should. I really, really want to do this now for PEL very strongly. I'll say that. But so they'll get their cake and eat it too. They'll get us confused, and then they'll get us acting like we know exactly what we're talking about.
All right. So, but I understand if people like to have things more digested. If anything, if the complaint that we've sometimes gotten for Partially Examined Life is that, wow, you guys are just improving this. Can't you write me a lecture and read it to me like all the other philosophy podcasts I like do? And we say, no, you're missing the point. We're basically doubling down on the thing that people sometimes complain about when they don't understand partial exam live format. By
Well, I think what the listener is asking for is more of the, when you have 4 personalities all doing their thing, and there's a certain chemistry and dynamic, and it's a little bit more, and it, of course, it's much more all over the place because it's not anchored in just reading the text, and
sure,
it's more Dionysian. This is more Apollonian. It's also, to my mind, it's more chaotic and confusing, probably, but this is closer to a lecture because it's so anchored in the text than it is to the chaos that goes on in the regular show, in my opinion. But
all right, well, folks can weigh in and
let us know.
We don't understand what we're doing yet. I think that's what's going on, is that after we do about 50 of these, we will understand what this is. Maybe that's even premature.
Also, I'm going to let listeners know that I'm working on this video lag thing. It's not my connection. Zoom is spiking my CPU for some reason, and I keep thinking that I fixed it by doing research online and testing it, and then it just keeps cropping up again. So,
see, now you're spoiling the magic, because people will be like, "Has Wes been working on ventriloquism?" and now we have to say no. It's technical.
Yeah,
I think Zoom introduced an AI feature, and though I didn't turn on anything related to that, and I have not even investigated what it involves, I'm blaming that.
I think it is part of that. I mean, I think it could be, because I tried a webcam with the AI stuff, and that was a disaster. CPU was. So anyway, cool.
AI is ruining everything. Our fledgling attempts at doing video presentations for ourselves. I seem to be perfectly in sync, and people who are watching the video are getting me in a beautiful fall setting that I'm introducing for this new series. So, you might want to switch over to the video if you're doing the audio. The audio, I have been editing them a little bit as I go through. Like if I see what looks like a giant silence, I will close that. Or if I remember that we're completely clueless about something, but for the most part, it's pretty much the same. So it's just a matter if you are entranced by our visages or not. Definitely do this if you're like riding a bike. I noticed a lot of people. I was just in Italy, and there were a lot of people like riding bikes with headphones on, and I don't really get that. Do you get that, Wes? Like, isn't that dangerous? I don't know.
Yeah, it's dangerous. But they're Italian. Are they wearing helmets? Probably not.
Oh no. There was like the only person with
we're
a
getting
helmet.
in a little anti-Italian bigotry at the very very end of the show.
All right. So long. Thanks for watching or listening as you might choose, and in whatever country you're doing it from. Bye.
Bye.